I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and heard behind me a great voice, as of a trumpet. The argument goes like this. John received his vision on the first day of the week, which he refers to as the Lord's Day in commemoration of the resurrection. This means that Sunday worship was an established tradition in the first century. The Layman's Bible Encyclopedia defines Lord's Day as literally the day which belongs to the Lord. The phrase occurs only once in the New Testament, in Revelation 1:10, but there are several references to it in post-apostolic literature which make it clear that it was the first day of the week, or Sunday. While it is evident that at some point believers began calling Sunday the Lord's Day, this custom cannot be supported from the Bible for 3 reasons. There are no contextual clues to indicate that this is the first day of the week. This is also known as eisegesis. That's something that's read into the text as support for a doctrine that is completely irrelevant to the context. It is important to note that the contextual clues that we have today are likely the same ones that the post-apostolic writers had, as this is the only time the Greek phrase appears in the Bible. And point number 2, Saturday can be called the Lord's Day. If this were referring to a day of the week that John received his vision, we could just as easily assume that the Lord's Day is referring to the Sabbath. Exodus 31:15 through 17 says that the 7th day is holy to the Lord, and that it is a covenant sign between the Lord and the children of Israel forever. In Isaiah 58:13, the Lord calls the Sabbath my holy day. In fact, Jesus himself said that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. However, there is a third and more likely reason that this is not referring to the first day of the week. It may not have been a day of the week at all. There is no immediate context to support the idea that the day he is referring to is a literal day of the week, only tradition that came later on. By taking into account the context of the verse, we can draw out a more compelling explanation for this phrase. As the Layman's Bible Encyclopedia states, this phrase literally means the day which belongs to the Lord. Said another way, you might call it the day of the Lord. The phrase day of the Lord occurs over 20 times in the Bible. This day is also called the day of the Lord Jesus, the day of Christ, etc. in the New Testament. In every instance, this is referring to the last day's event of the Lord's wrath, a time of judgment, wrath, and destruction, and ultimately the second coming of Christ. So, returning to the context of Revelation 1:10, John was in the Spirit on, or in, the day of the Lord, or the Lord's day. Jesus speaks of the day of the Lord in Matthew 24. In verse 31, he says that he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet to gather the elect. The sound of the trumpet is tied to the day of the Lord throughout the Scriptures, as in Joel 2:1, which says, "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, for the day of the Lord cometh." So it is no stretch to assume that the Lord's Day is the day of the Lord, when within the same sentence John describes the great voice being as of a trumpet. So let's look again at the argument. It is reading into the passage to say that the Lord's Day refers to the first day of the week. Since this is the only usage of the Greek phrase, it could just as easily be said that the 7th day is the Lord's Day. However, within the context, the Lord's Day should be understood to mean the day of the Lord.